And we are live.
Yeah.
Everybody, hi. Welcome to A Branch of Laurels. I'm Ashexi from Untitled, and this is a weekly interview show where I interview Laurels from around the known world. And tonight we have Helen, Jennet, Foxhall from Atenveldt, who is not only a Laurel, but also a Pelican and a Lion of Atenveldt. So welcome.
Very happy to be here.
Thank you for taking the time to hang out with me tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I usually like to start these interviews off with asking how you found the SCA and what attracted you to it.
Well, and that's where we need a little picture to come up, because I originally found the SCA in 1974. I was going to college in Santa Fe, and I was walking down one of the lovely streets near downtown Santa Fe that included the Santa Fe River. And across the street, there's a park. And I see these two fine gentlemen, young, in some kind of strange armor and Freon helms. And they were practicing sword fight with big fat sticks. And being a fencer from the age of 7, I decided I will just wander over and see what's going on. At the time, I was working on a theater degree, and I had been trained in stage combat, but I had started with swords very, very early. My brother, until the day he died, had a scar above his right eye where I got him with a fireplace poker, and he left me alone after that. I was about 7, and I took up competitive fencing. And did not quit fencing until I was into my late 30s. And I didn't find the SCA again until really the mid 80s. I want to say 83, 84, maybe. I'm not quite sure. It was the first time I went to a major event. It was Australian number 3. We're now on what, 36 or 37 now? But the Freon helmet was luckily phased out, because as you can see by the dents on that one, it did not work very well. I was asked really to come to a demonstration at the Devonshire Renaissance Fair. And that included a small community group of volunteers that would put on a Renaissance Fair. They'd been to a few in California. And they were like, well, we could do that in our home neighborhood. And they did. I happen to live in the neighborhood. But they contacted me directly through Southwest Fencing Club, which I was a founding member of. And they said, well, can you come and just show us some combat fencing? We'd really like to see how fencing works and stuff. And I said, well, I don't have any costumes that's going to match your Devonshire Ren Fair. And for safety reasons, I'm going to have to wear my whites, and any other fencers that I have with me are going to also be in their competition whites, because you never go out with a sword in your hand and go into competition mode without having your safety gear on. So I went to my first event that also included some people from the SCA at the Devonshire Ren Fair. It was a great, great event. It was really fun. And I said, oh, are you people that group that does sword fighting and doesn't let women fight? And they went, no, that's wrong. We will let women fight. If they really want to get out there and fight, we will let you fight. And I'm like, good, I'll come with my swords. Now, what time period are we doing? And coming from my background in theater, it was a matter of pick a time frame. I probably can do the costumes. And that's how I got started in the SCA, was just coming out with a foil in my hand. And at the time, I was on the board of the SAL I was training at, and I even have a gold medal scar to prove it. The particular coach that I had was Jan Drimba. He was the gold medal winner in men's foil in 1968 in Mexico City. Pretty sure it was 68 or 69, right in there. But he defected from his then communist country and came to America in the hopes to be able to fence and teach fencing. How he ended up in Phoenix, I have no idea. but we found him a place to live. We found him a place to work. We found him a place to coach. And during one of my bouts with him, I went into overdrive. We were just doing a training bout. He was only in master's gear, which is not quite as protected. It's really just a vest, a sword, a glove, and a mask. And I must have been very lucky that day because I was able to switch him over into competition mode. And he hit me right above my chest protectors. And every time I have to go for a smashgram, as you ladies know, those are not fun. But having to explain why I have a scar from the biopsy that some doctor said I had to have because he didn't trust that that was just scar tissue, when I explained that my fencing coach had hit me top speed. And we're talking true top speed. I mean, there have been Olympic fencers who have died from one of those going haywire. And luckily he didn't kill me. If he hadn't had the rabbit blunt on his sword, I would be dead. Wow. He separated a rib, left a huge bruise that was quite spectacular. And it's just really fun to see the faces of the technicians when I go in to explain why I have that. So fencing has been in my blood for a long time. I fenced both in grade school, through college, through summer camp, and then, as I said, all the way into my 30s until I couldn't do it anymore. And instead, I found ways to still participate in it in the SCA, but we'll get to those. So,
what year was this that you went to this fair?
I went to the fair probably, I want to say the early 80s. There might be somebody else on who remembers the Devonshire Rens Fair. But, you know, it had to be the early 80s because it's fuzzy. It's a long time ago for me.
That works for me. That's specific enough.
Well, as I said, my first major event was Estrella 3. This I kind of was really fun to take Hagar the Horrible, because he's certainly been the Viking we've all known and loved for many years, whether we're interested in that time period or not, because there were some great jokes in there, and they got away with some things that a lot of other cartoonists couldn't get away with. But I did a little bit of editing, so I hope they will apologize for my copyright infringement. And this was taken from one that said, you have to admire his guts. And I got somebody came up and told me this when I first joined the SCA and started fencing in historically accurate as much as I could make garb at the time. And they said, Tam, you can't go out and fight on hard suit. I said, no, I'm not, but I'm the only sword that's here that can fight this. So we're going to see what we can do. Now, according to some of the other participants that got into rapiers soon after that, I was the one that had the first sword out there. I don't necessarily believe that around the world, but I do believe that in Atenveldt, I was the only one. And it was fun to see how many of the hard suit fighters would step over when we brought loaner garb and gear, especially the face masks, who would do it. That includes Trelon, and a lot of the fighters. I was the first Renaissance woman to win the event held over in Sundragon, one of the baronies here in Phoenix, that not only fenced, I painted, I wrote poetry, I sang, I performed. I don't think I had to cook. That wasn't considered an art of the Renaissance, but it was quite fun to become the first woman to win the Renaissance man at the first event. So that was amazing. So I kind of edited too is don't underestimate me. And this is something I wanted to put for myself, in that for all the things you've already heard me say I've done, this has been a learning process for over 30 years. The SCA, I think, is fantastic in that you can do lots of things. You can change your direction. You can change your garb to a different time period. I've jumped time periods a couple of times. I really try to create an atmosphere that is not just theatrical, but something more than that. And that is for my own enjoyment. And if anybody else around me also gets encouraged for something, then that makes it that much better for me. This is, if any of you were at Estrella 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, all the way up to probably about Estrella 10, this was Charles Everett Brown. Chucky Brown, he is a 3-legged brown dog. He was a wonderful companion to take to the SCA with me. He guarded me, he protected me. He kept my feet warm at a number of cold Estrellas. He traveled with me with my then partner, who did not participate in the SCA. They didn't quite get it. They weren't interested in it. But as time went on, they became more interested in it. And that was a lady who is now a duchess. So I'm doing a coming out here in that I am and have always been in my adult life out of the closet. I have been a rider. I shoot shotguns, I shoot target, I shoot pistol, I shoot archery. I prefer the crossbow, but I don't have one right now. And I've actually got some problems that probably won't allow me to ever shoot again, but we just keep trying. And I have never been in the closet once I moved to Phoenix. I marched in the Pride parades very early on, and there were more participants there. I'm sorry, there were more cops than participants at some of the first Pride marches in Arizona. And I was usually one of the sheriffs and one of the voices that would speak for people, and was instrumental in starting the Center Against Sexual Assault in Phoenix, which has since changed into a different organization. But at that time, it was so different and new and so needed, and is still needed, I'm sorry to say, that I count as one of my many accomplishments that have to do with the one thing that I wish to be known for when I'm gone is that I have always encouraged people. And that takes courage from me, and it takes courage from you, because I am basically a very quiet, shy person when somebody doesn't grab me and ask me to speak. Chuck is how I met a lot of the powers that be in Atenveldt when I first arrived. He would be on the sidewalk with me. He'd be at some of the events with me. It's actually how I met Duke Trelon. Duke Trelon was walking past me when Chuck was on a long lead, and he was digging into a gopher hole. Now, when you're a 3-legged brown dog missing your front leg and you're digging into a gopher hole and you know you're going to get that gopher, it's very interesting to watch him do it, because he would balance on his nose and he would come back with a whole pile of dirt on his nose, and he'd actually literally wear some of the skin off. But when Trelon arrived, he had just started on this gopher hole. And Estrella War site at the Estrella Park was known for gopher holes everywhere. And Trelon wandered by, and he just, he looked at the dog, and he says, hey, he doesn't have a front leg, right? Yeah, he'd seen him walking around earlier. And I said, yeah. Now, I've had many people come up to me when I was walking Chuck in events, and especially the children were always so much fun. They would walk up and say, oh my gosh, lady, do you know he's missing his leg? And I would say things like, I pinned it on him yesterday. I don't know where it went. It must have fallen off. Well, if you see it, bring it back with me. I'll try and pin it on him again. And then they would ask me, can he walk? And I'd be like, he can walk pretty good, but he does better when he runs. Would you like to take him for a run? And these kids would be like, he can't run. He's missing a leg. Nah, just here, take the handle, put it around your wrist. Don't let go of him, because I'll be chasing him all over the war site if you lose him. And I would always keep them in sight of me, but they would run off and disappear, they thought. And I would see him just run the legs off those kids. He could fly. He was very long, low, and strong, and he could just fly on his back legs. And he did that. Now, let's go back to Duke Trelon and his lovely gopher hole. And I said to his grace, I said, well, why don't you, are you headed somewhere? You're going to be back by here in about 10, 15 minutes. And he says, yeah, well, then I'll wait and I'll show you how effective he can be. And he says, oh, he can't go any further. He's going to run out of room if he doesn't have a leg down there. And I said, well, you want to make a bet on it? And he said, yeah. I can't remember the amount, but I know that I won because the only thing he could see when he came back was the very white tip of Chuck's tail all the way down the gopher hole. And he came back up with he wanted to eat it, but I wouldn't let him. He caught his gopher, which was not necessarily a good thing. But Trelawn was like, wow, that's really cool. Why don't you come on down to my camp? So we wandered down and we became very good friends after that. And then I got to be yanked by him when he was at an event one time. He says, I need a herald. Come here, Helen, you'll do. Come here, you've got a voice. And I'm like, oh, geez, I don't want to do this. Now, when I was in theater, I did some voice. I did some radio. I did some movies. I did some TV. I did, a lot of different things. But I didn't really know what a herald was. I hadn't been playing quite that long. So he says, I just need you to make an announcement. And I said, okay, is it going to a big group, small group, what? He says, oh, just make it as loud as you can. I said, okay. And when I got finished making the announcement, he turned at me and said, what are you doing at coronation? I'm like, nothing that I know of. I want you to meet my lady. Come on. And he introduced me to his then wife, Daphne. And we chatted for a little while and she got to know me and says, Trelawn says I'm supposed to use you as my herald. And I'm like, oh, okay. I had no idea what a queen's herald did. I had no idea. She wasn't queen yet, but she says, I'll explain it to you. We'll get it. We'll get it all organized. And then they introduced me to Duke Deaton and Count Dennis of the Titans. And Dennis is the one who coached me into how to be a court herald. I also asked him, I said, well, what else do I need to be, should I dress a certain way? He said, well, if you can do it, if you can make a tabard, we don't have any tabards for the heralds. They've been lost or misplaced or somebody took them with them or whatever. Can you sew? And I'm like, I didn't say I could sew well, but he didn't know I'd been trained in the theater for a long time in sewing and worked with Santa Fe Opera and the Greer Garson Theater and movie sets and other stuff. So yeah, I could drive a sewing machine a good 60 miles an hour. And he said, well, can you make something like this? And he gave me an idea for the tabards. And we went ahead and I made the tabards. And I didn't know I wasn't supposed to make two because I made one for him with the king's arms and I made one for me with the queen's arms. And those are still part of Kingdom Regalia. So I was thrilled to make those. It wasn't embroidered though. They weren't real heavy. Oh, and here's Queen Varia.
Well, I wanted to show the tabard real quick.
There we got the tabard. And that is the Queen's tabard. The King's tabard we'll see a little bit later on, I think, because I got to be I was either herald or part of the ladies and support people. And anytime a queen needed a herald, I was always handy with my tabard folded up in my pouch and ready to go. This is Duchess Varia at the Devonshire Ren Fair. Varia was, for many people, their first queen. And especially for the people that are still friends with me, she was magnificent. Here she is playing Queen Elizabeth. And one of the things I was good at making was Elizabethan ruffs. So whenever anyone needed a ruff, I would not make them one unless they were paying me, but I would show them how to make one so that they could go on then to make ruffs in different ways. I also worked with a wonderful costumer named Master Byron della Farfalla. And Master Byron taught me a lot more tricks that I didn't know from sewing. But he also was willing to teach how to make the Spanish robusto, which is the iron work underneath, the metal work underneath a ruff that brings it way up, or the extra large I'm not even sure what to call them. I call them the lizard collars because that's what you look like, is that giant lizard with the ruff around them. But ruffs was one of my specialties. And then I ended up making them for the Renaissance Fair here. And anyone else who needed one just is like, well, give me a call. We'll see what we can do. But I taught it. And one of the tricks to making an Elizabethan ruff, especially in the figure eight style that you see on me, is that I used what was looked like a cribbage board, but it was various dimensions of the width of the figure eights. And then it was like Tinker Toy sticks that would go into the holes. And then depending on how far out the ruff would come, you might have to do a special folding to get it laid in there properly to add it to the neckband. But the neckbands are just done flat against the neck and either tied or hooked. You can also attach those to the collar of a shirt if you need to. But the advantage to having the cribbage board was that it made it so flexible and so fast that I could sit down and crank a washable ruff in about maybe 3 to 4 hours or a couple of good movies. And I've had one that's, I tried to find it in the last week or so. I could not find it, which means I may have either passed it on to someone or it's buried in my garage. But I have one that's almost, it is the ruff that I'm wearing in this picture. It looks a little more saggy, but then don't I? And it's quite fun. And then Varia's was made by, well, she helped with some of the layout on it, but it was made by, oh gosh, what was his name? He's passed on a number of years ago. Played harpsichord and was a beautiful costumer, made wonderful, wonderful things. I'll think of it in a minute, I'm sure. But this was at the Devonshire Ren Fair, which was always a fun one to get kind of wild at. And this was the event I was made a court baroness. And I had not been playing that long. So it was like, whoa, all righty. I'm thrilled because the SCA would then have an event following the closure of public fair. And then we had a private event using all of the facilities available to us within the organization. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of fun. All right. This is the tabard that I made when Trelon grabbed me. This was also my fighting doublet. And it was multi-purpose because it worked for both men and women as an outside hunting doublet. I could either fight in pants or skirts, but what I discovered is that most of the male fencers couldn't figure out where my feet were in the skirts. So I fought in skirts often. I would fight a lot of times with just a brace of daggers in my skirts, and I would win the bout. They couldn't tell where I was going. And that's one of the advantages to being a female fighter, is that because of the realignment of the hips, and that's why women should always spend a little time training with a more experienced woman fighter, because where you put your feet will determine what you do and how you move, and not injure yourself. So I've had a lot of fun with that. The tabard actually fits in that little blue leather case there that I've had for years and years. So now this is me cross-dressing, because heaven forbid that Helen should always have to be in female garb. I often wore male garb, and I can't tell whether that's my jeans or my blue linen pants or my blue wool pants, but I do know that it was much warmer there. This was one of the coldest days where we literally had snow up on the mountain above us, and it was so cold. I'm wearing my my goatskin wrapper that I usually only slept in. And I'm like, no, I'm wearing this out because it's really cold here. But my kitchen, I also cook. I have, I'm looking at 2 feet of, 2 shelves, both of them about 2.5 feet long, filled with period cookbooks, modern reproductions, things like Plain Delight and things like that. My specialty is open fire cooking using different woods. Now, luckily, I have a wood vendor here in Arizona who specializes now with a lot of the woods that are used in the restaurants. Cook with apple and over pork chops. You don't need any applesauce then. You cook with orange wood, and it just, you get a citrus flavor you can't get any other way. One of my favorite and easiest ones to do is you can use capons, you can use chickens, you can go all the way up to chicken or goose or, whatever, or turkey. I'm not fond of turkey only because it's not English, But I think that once they got them, they would have imported them quickly because they bred like crazy. But I wash it, I stuff it with oranges and onions, all chopped up together. And if you use Seville oranges, it comes out very tangy. If you use other orange, with the Seville being, of course, the Spanish orange that's been around for centuries, it comes out it's a little bit bitter. You can't eat the orange itself, but when you steam it inside a bird, sewn into a bird, all that juice and steam and onion flavor goes into the bird. So technically my Laurel is only in costuming and cordial making, but I've tried a little bit of everything within the SCA. I can't say I'm an expert and can make my living at it, but I have made my living at cordial making. I think we'll have a recipe, a single recipe posted later. It's not going to be in tonight's presentation, but we will see if we can get that out there.
I'll post it to the sisters page afterwards.
Oh, great. Okay. So if anybody has questions about cordial making simples or infusions, they're certainly welcome to contact me, and we can discuss the safety and the use of alcohol and fruit flavoring. But the simplest one I'm going to put out there is a blackberry. Very simple to do, only takes a couple of weeks to actually capture the flavors, and you can have a magnificent gift or a presentation to royals or whatever, as long as you check to make sure that they can drink alcoholic beverages.
Jennet is saying that you started the period encampment at Estrella.
I did. I started the period encampment, and it was quite a challenge to begin with. Prior to that, I'd fought some battles at Estrella. One of them I recall being a 2-year battle to get handicapped restrooms at Estrella. At the time, the main autocrats were all military veterans, and they could not understand why anybody would want a handicapped restroom. And I finally got to the point after 2 years of arguing for it. And I'm one of the people that at that time, they were not aware that my handicaps were invisible, but very painful. And the theater, I was a professional pantomime. And I toured the country. I performed off Broadway. I've performed on the streets of San Francisco. I've done all kinds of pantomime puppetry at things. I was hit by a car, and that ended my pantomime career. I couldn't quite get away from theater, but luckily the SCA gave me a wonderful outlet for that. I, however, really wanted to go a little bit further. I finally read Kariadok's discussions on, and that's not Koran, mind you, that's the Kariadok. It's coming out in the translations very strangely. His discussion of how to host a period encampment, how to deal with some of the negativity that comes across when you try to do that, but to make it as educational as we can by living in it as much as we can. And I started with myself. Said, can I go to an event? Can I live without? What modern things can I live without? And my only compromise was having to do with food kept on ice that would spoil. But planning the menus got to be more interesting to find more and more period things that would work, or making some compromises in what you could cook over the stove, what you could make. The initial period encampment was held at a Highlands War. And I think we had 3 pavilions, and that's all. And if you look at the pictures now at Estrella War or Penzic War or any of the other events, the pavilions are way on the far side of majority. Any tent is welcome. It was not welcome within the grounds of the Enchanted Encampment. So I took the worst land at Estrella Park, which if it rained too much, we'd flood. It was in prickery trees that if you weren't careful, you'd get out. You know, it's like, oh gosh, okay. but it had shade and it had a spot where I could unplug the overhead park lights, and nobody knew about it. So we went by candlelight, and we ended up with usually 20 to 30 tents by the time we got to the dates of my laurel. My laurel was given in, gosh, I want to say, you have my order of precedence, don't you? I want to say 1989 was my pelican.
Let's see. I'll pull it up. Go ahead and keep talking, and I'll.
Okay. But the challenge was that people were like, well, this is the SCA and we welcome everybody. I said, yes, we do. But here's what we'd like to try to do. And I got a lot of agreement, both from the royalty, all of the royalty, all the baron and baronesses, I talked to everybody I could talk to, as well as the king and queen, as well as the autocrats for the event. They said, well, go ahead and try it, and let's see what you can do at Highlands. I said, okay. And it sort of worked. They gave me the worst property they could, and we had a few people participate. Everybody was reminded as they step into the area that do not talk about modern things. Please put yourself in persona if you have one. If you have questions, please ask, but take your modern discussions away. And it worked not quite so well the first time, and it just got better. I think in many places, it inspired a lot of people to learn more things. So it was not just a verbal or a teaching moment, it was a visible moment of there's nothing modern in your sight. My ice chest had a cover. I had as much period stuff as I could find or research or have made or borrow in some cases. And simply going to reducing the overhead electric lights added to that magic atmosphere. When it came to my laurel vigil, it was absolutely amazing. My pavilion was up. There were all of my household pavilions were up. Many other pavilions, I can't even remember how many tents there were, but there wasn't a Coleman light in sight. There wasn't an electric light in sight. There were no solar lights in sight. They weren't invented yet, I don't think. That's how old I am. And it was really a magic time. I had over 100 people sign my laurel book. And not everybody who was there got to sign the book. So I know there were more who would have. But I was in my pavilion and just feeling very humble, very encouraged that I had made some difficult and sometimes unliked decisions in how I was going to participate in the SCA. But when I look at it today, what I see is a lot more people learning a lot more about the real history as well as how it can impact us today. I have one of my shelves here is filled with books of the plague, including the complete Decameron. Well, actually, my doctor borrowed my complete Decameron because he is in a group practice that was dealing with it to begin with. He got my Decameron over a year and a half ago. He says, I really think we're going to have some problems coming forward, and I want to be prepared. He said, I had no idea how much information there was in the Decameron. But when you're in your tent at a vigil, it just can be so emotional and spiritual all at the same time. When I was given my pelican, I didn't know I could have a vigil. I don't know that Atenveldt had ever had a vigil for a pelican or a laurel prior to that. That would be something I'd have to check with those who have been playing longer than I. And that's almost 50 years for Arizona.
So I have your dates. Pelican is 89 and Laurel is 95.
Okay, in 95. And the king and queen at that time were Thorfinn and Sarah. And they were from Loch Salon up in Salt Lake City. And they were I was floored when they asked me. And then when I got up there and started the announcement, we processed. It was a midday court. And I just gathered friends and people I knew, and I said, "Come with me. I'm going to court. I need your help. I sent the household out and I said, gather everybody you can. Come on, let's go. I need everybody around me. I can't do this by myself, because I couldn't do any of this by myself. I have a huge bunch of friends and family and people who are so special that make it so wonderful. Oh, this is fun. This is this is me cross-dressing again when I was playing the Pope. But the more I thought about it, I wasn't cross-dressing, in that I was the only female Pope in recreation, and hence the crown, the three crowns of the papal seal, the rings. I have my standard crook, which was my only walking stick all the time, but it served good purpose for the Pope. And then, of course, I had to make new beads to go with it. I had quite a lot of fun. I even made the papal cowl from about the 10th century, when you couldn't tell whether they were from Avignon or from Rome. But I got murdered. So it was a murder mystery. So I got to be the ghost of the only female Pope who wasn't cross-dressing at an event that was having just a wonderful time. I had a blast at this event. This was so much fun, so much fun. All right, what else you got? Oh, this is one of the infamous dirt auctions. One of the fundraisers that I committed to was making sure that both the Chirurgeons and the children's area always had everything they needed. The difficulty being is that it's really hard to raise money when you're in duty, and especially with anyone who's working with the kids, is they're already taking care of the kids. They're not going to walk around in it. So I checked with the royalty, and I checked with the treasury, and I checked with the autocrats, and I started a dirt auction following a small sheriff's auction I had done at the barony of Atenveldt. Now, that auction at the barony was the dregs of the bottom of the bucket left over from previous events for, at least maybe 2 years. There was one child's shoe covered in mud. I hope it was mud. There was one broken buckle. There was a couple of straps. There was one battered old hockey glove. None of it worth very much, but I said, okay, we're going to have an auction. Let's see what we can do. And we made quite a bit of money off this little auction at a baronial fighter practice. And this is when they were being the largest baronial fighter practices in the known world, I think. We were getting maybe, in some nights, we'd get 50 to 60, maybe up to 100 people. And somebody walked up to me after the auction. It could have been Una for all I know. And they said, Helen, Jennet, you could sell anything. And I was like, and I said, well, what do you mean? I said, you could sell dirt. And I'm like, I could sell dirt. I could sell dirt. I'm going to sell dirt. When we got to Australia, by that time, it had organized itself into, we're going to sell dirt from different places. We're going to sell dirt from the site, if we can get some. I had dirt from Diane Listmaker's backyard from the first event. And that went for a goodly amount, I'll tell you. I had dirt from Stonehenge. I had dirt from Notre Dame. I had dirt that I had collected from the tomb of Saint Martin in Tours in France. Very tiny amount. There was just a little scrap of it in a tiny bottle. But it was, all of those things were then sold to raise money, and we would raise a couple of $100 every dirt auction. Sometimes we'd get close to 500. We're not sure. Then it kind of tried to blossom out a little bit, and somebody handed me something and said, here, try and sell this. And I said, well, what is it? It says, it's what's left of my burnt toast from this morning. Okay, I'm selling the burnt toast. and up steps Banthane Deborah, who offers $60 for a piece of burnt toast. And I'm like, okay, that's enough. That's enough. And since then, whenever I'm at an event and I have any of the dirt with me, I will sometimes hold those. They kind of fell by the wayside. The last 10 years for me have been kind of tough with family issues, so I haven't attended as many events as I ordinarily would have in my 30s, 40s, and 50s. So it's my wish that we can bring it back, because I still have a whole lot of dirt in the back room. I have the strangest stuff hanging out in the dirt auction. So I'm hoping it's a tradition that we could bring back to Estrella. But I'll have to do some checking and find someone to help me with it, because I need a new herald to take it on. Again, this is me being rather butch in my days. The honor of being brought up at a fighter practice, and this is one of the courts held at Encanto Park. This is my dear friend Baroness Dasha and Sir Flanagan, who is now in the Outlands. I think it is it Duke Flanagan now? I think so.
I don't know. Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah. He was a fine Irishman that he was. He chose this lovely lady of Dasha to be his baroness, and I often got to be their herald and would step up and help whenever I can. But as you can see, I'm dressed for the heat of Phoenix. It just gets Atenveldt can get very, very hot. But try to do my bit and serve wherever I can, because I have a great difficulty separating service from my Pelican and my Laurel, which is why when I have them both going, do you need sewing? Do you need cooking? Do you need whatever? I'm also, at the time I was also a chirurgeon. So it's like, well, tell me what you need. I'll take care of it. Let's just get it done. This was another one fun. You can see again, my crook shows up everywhere because I had a lot of difficulty walking, but it wasn't, I tried to keep it as invisible as possible. It's no longer possible. The event, however, was one unusual one. This was the Laurels prize tournament, and every one of the fighters in it was a Laurel. I, by this time, was also, I believe, a Laurel. But they wanted a male Laurel, so I dressed as masculine as I know how. I think I pulled it off pretty well. But you can see the belts. We've got squires, we've got knights, we've got masters. All 5 of those guys are Laurels. So it was quite a fun battle. They did an amazing round of combats too. Quite fun. Okay, I got to take a sip here. I'm getting dry.
Oh yeah.
This is one of the events that I am the proudest of, and feeling very strong at this event. This was the one of the women's rapier competitions, and I'm happy to see that Rapier did not die, and that many women got involved in this. And back here in the back, you can see Dame Banthane Deborah with her fist up in the air there. She is also a mover and shaker within the rapier community. She is one of the white scarves. I don't believe she has the Master of Defense, though. Mastery of Defense. And any of the women who do have it, more power to you. That's great. That is a wonderful step that was taken way after I had to quit fighting. The women's tournament, we hope to bring it back. We're hoping for Estrella on Thursday. We're still working out some of the details on that, so hopefully that will occur. And I think the next picture should be Banthane Deborah. Yeah, Deborah and Diego were Baron and Baroness of Sundragon. So a lot of support and hard work from them She has always been one of my mentors and is just such a sweetheart. I will be looking forward to seeing her. I've seen actually Diego at more recently, but not within the last pandemic lockdown. So wonderful lady if you see her. This is part of my household. This is the encampment for the most part. And this was a really special dinner. This was one of the masters, a Laurel in cooking, who came and said, I will cook for you, but you have to pull the feast together. Well, what he does is he goes shopping to the nearest grocery store. He comes back with whatever he likes, and he puts together a magnificent feast. We have to supply all the implements and things that happen. But I think overall, this looks like a pretty historically accurate dinner for a lot of people on very short notice. And I was so proud of everybody. We just pulled it all together and said, okay, who's got some lights? And I had the candles and I had them. And that's my chair here at the end. We pulled benches out of part of one camp and chairs out of another camp. And everybody made a huge effort to find all their feast gear. And at war, that's particularly amazing thing. When Master Fritz says dinner is ready, believe me, you want to be in that line. He's a wonderful chef from Atlantia. And I gave him as a gift, as a memento from this cooking event, I gave him I couldn't give him a whole lot because he was flying back on an airplane the next day to his home. But I gave him a meat hook for turning meats. And he was like, this is absolutely correct. Where did you find this? And I'm like, I'm not telling you because I want to keep that source. But he said, this is a duplicate of one I have in one of my books. You even have the angle for how to pick up the meat properly. I said, well, if you need it reworked, I can have the smith rework it. And he was like, okay, now we know it's a blacksmith. Okay, great. Now we're close. So it was just a wonderful, wonderful meal. Now this, we have the combination of the Queen's Herald's tabard, which I think photographs just beautifully, as well as the ruff and the Elizabethan hat that goes with it in full Elizabethan garb hiding under it. Boy, did I not die of the heat in that. I'm one of those people that the only thing I don't need to make when I'm making Elizabethan garb is a bum roll. A bum roll is not needed. I come with my own built in, and pleated skirts hang beautifully. Even a fighting skirt hangs beautifully when you come with that already attached. So it got quite warm in a full Elizabethan. You can see just a little bit of the black work on my wrist. This was the reign of Nichelle, and I can't remember his name either. Boy, this getting old is just hell.
I love that you can remember the queens, though. That's
I always remember the ladies.
Of course.
to quote Abigail Adams, remember the ladies. I always remember the ladies, but I think that's one of my charming things. I can always remember the ladies. And if I can't remember their names, I always remember their sparkling eyes. And there are a few I can make blush on a moment's notice.
Woohoo!
Because I was known when I could still dance well in the early years. I was terrible at, we would do that not historically accurate hole in the wall dance. I remember doing it at Caid once, that there must have been 200 people dancing.
Wow.
And every time I would hit this one lady, I would shark in and take the spot. And she'd be like, but that's my husband. What is he going to do? I'll talk to him later. It's okay. I'm just dancing with you. You're the most beautiful woman in the hall. I must have said that to 30 or 40 women, I'm sure. But I had a wonderful time sharking during Hole of the Wall at Caid's coronation. It was great. I think I'd gone there with, I want to say Daphne, but it might have been Varia. I'm not sure. We went to so many coronations. This is House Foxhall having its fun because the SCA is really fun. There's my Shannon over on the far side with her quiet look, going, I'm not going to be too silly, but I'll get Maxine right with the two fingers behind the head. This is on the day that the lady in the middle in the lovely white apron, Morgaine, was elevated to the Pelican. She's wearing my first Pelican, maybe my second Pelican, I'm not sure. They get jumbled up sometimes in the jewelry box, but it was one that has heraldry all over the back of it, so I'm pretty sure that one was mine. And the rest of the household, we have a Baron and Baroness, a Bantain. We have the kids in between. The really crazy one in the front is one of the nicest people I know. So kind, wonderful teachers, and kids that have grown up in the society all the way since I've known them as babies, and now they are full-grown adults, professional writers. They are programmers, they're computer experts, they're in retail, they're in public health, they are in all kinds of things, the financial world, the airlines. They're just the most interesting group of people, and I love them all. Wait a minute, I'm not seeing, oh, there he is. Benedict is standing right behind me, and I'm so very proud of him and his sister Maxine, who's in the yellow scarf on the left side. They are all just wonderful, wonderful folks. I miss them all like I want to burst into tears right now. This is hard. They are fun. They are talented. They are smart. They are always giving of time and energy. And I love them all. Love them all. Okay, let's move on to something else because I'm going to cry soon.
Okay. There we go.
This is the one time I got to be the King's Herald, and that's His Majesty Jonathan behind me. We are leading the troops to the first battle of Estrella War. Over on the far right-hand side in the crucifix is Justin Durac, Viscount Justin Durac, a wonderful man. We do not see each other enough. He is just a great and talented man. I wish I had his strength. I have been tempted many times to say, Justin, can I live with you for 2 months and you help me work out and work through my frustrations with my body that won't allow me to do what I want to do? And he's always said, yes, let me know when you can come down. And I haven't been able to get down there yet. So I guess it must not be that important. Now, leading the parade is, of course, Master Sheamus, the Kingdom Herald. Master Sheamus and I have had the most interesting conversations, I can tell you, in so many ways. He's a wonderful man. He had to learn heraldry the hard way, though, and especially the court's herald job, which I'm happy to give suggestions to anyone who'd like one. And hold on, I got a dog who's caught for some reason in her bed. I'm not sure what's going on. Wait a second. I got to step away a second here. Come on, baby. Come on.
Have a little pet intermission.
Yeah. Well, she rolled out the wrong side of the bed and got caught behind the power cables, so that's not good. But she figured it out. Okay, I'm going to let her out.
In our house, that results in computers on the floor, so it's a good thing to address immediately.
Yes, I didn't want her to unplug me from anything. All of that. But usually her bed is right next to me, and I didn't want her there for various and sundry reasons. This is again Shannon is the little one, and Baroness Dasha is the big one. And this outfit that Dasha is wearing, I should say, Dorofio Rostova something or other. She was Baroness of Atenveldt. She's a Pelican, and we are so sad to have lost her. My dear friend for over 30 years, just really hard. But she asked to borrow this from me, and I said, well, you can be a scholar for the night. And this was made using a technique that you will see today in graduation outfits where it's gathered. But this was a scholar's robe from the late Tudor era, Queen Elizabeth I. And it was done with a single piece of fabric created. I have no idea how I found this particular piece, but as you can see, the gathers make it look like 2 layers of woven fabric but it's all done with a hot iron and a lot of starch. And then it was all hand stitched together, hand beaded, because what Elizabethan lady would go out without her beads, and allowed to drape and fall with the paned sleeves and the black work look on the cuffs and everything, as well as the ancient and honorable ruff that has been around forever. So I was thrilled to be able to get this picture from a friend who sent it. They were like, oh, well, you like this one because Shannon's in it. And I'm like, oh, Shannon's gonna hurt me. But I thought that was just a wonderful picture, Shannon. All right, who else we got here? This is me in one of my lowlands style, a more Dutch style in garb. This was with the help of Master Byron Della Farfalla. He came up with an idea because of my challenges. I cannot wear an Elizabethan corset. So he came up with a way to hold the girls where they're supposed to be, as well as still give me the correct look for the time period, including the falling collar and everything else. I just loved his help on this. I did all the sewing on it myself, and he just guided my my hand, and we drove it as hard as we could. This was one of the major garbs early before a coronation. I'm sure I've worn this to many events at the time. Where it is now, I have no idea. Most of that garb has been given and passed on to other people to wear and enjoy until it wore out. But that was a thin cut one. Now this one takes me way, way back. And as you said it when we were looking at these earlier, the hairstyle on the lovely Baroness on the left there, that is Baroness Constance of Monstonitrus. She was the founding Baroness of Monstonitrus down in Sierra Vista, Arizona. And she had quite a challenge. Her husband was on military leave in Schwarzkopf's staff. She spent much of her time both at Estrella War by herself. So she would camp near us. So we were always happy to host her. I was there at the installation of her on the Monstonitrus thrones because of traveling with Trelawn. I was the herald that went with Trelawn, and a different herald went with, I think it was Daphne at that time. We got to travel all over the place. In the middle is Duchess Katerina, who was my partner for 8 years. And then she joined the SCA after we split up, and she changed her team. Is with a wonderful man who takes very good care of her, and I hope he makes her happy. But she looks great in that. That was probably one of my first events because she wanted something that would open from the front, and I was like, okay, let's see what we can do. And again, me in a Master Byron assisted outfit. I did all of the sewing, the same ruff. They are very versatile. There's no gender on a ruff. For much of the time period. The black work was a gift from someone who spent a lot of time. They did a beautiful job on this shirt or underdress and you can see, you can't see much of the detail in these, but it was just a wonderful outfit to wear and to pass on to someone else that I hope was able to enjoy it. I think the hair outfit on me is a little bit different because that's a snood under, I'm sorry, a coif with a snood over the outside, but it does imply that netted work that would have been earlier Tudor, but I got a little more exact in some other outfits, so goes from there. So this was quite fun. This is one of the things that I think anyone who aspires to the laureate or wishes to be known and respected as a laurel, it's one of the hardest things to do, and that's to judge competitions. let's see, that is Master Verone and I are judging the book entries at the Australia War competition. This was one of the War Point entries. So it was very, very important that we do a good job of that. So bookbinding is also one of my specialties. I'm not a Laurel in it, but I have certainly encouraged many people to do it. I can't do it anymore. In fact, I have some book blanks ready to be sewn. I have corals ready. If anybody wants them, please let me know. I'll be happy to ship them to you. Some of them are beautifully done in large paper. Some are a little bit smaller. And it's all in the folding. But it's also how you do your stitch holes and doing that sewing. And the book competitions, any of the competitions, I have a hard time balancing my opinions, which are very strong, between is art a competition? Is art an expression of you, who you are? Is it an expression of your history? Is it, where does art fall when it becomes a competition? And because we live in an economic democracy, competition is part of that because it is so driven. There are very few places that would survive the arts without those who donate regularly to support the arts institutions. And that's everything from the big museums. Like in Phoenix, we have the Museum of Musical Instruments, MIM, M-I-M. And it is, when Da Vinci went from working with one powerhouse in Venice or Verona or Padua, it's because they were paying his way. He got to eat, as did his staff. He got all the materials he needed. He got to design what he wanted designed. In between the times, he was designing what his patron wanted. And we wouldn't have some of the art that we have from Da Vinci or Catherine de Pizan or anyone else if they didn't have the sponsorship of the royalty. Well, that is also where we need to step in as peers of the realm, and that includes the Pelicans, the Knights, the Masters of Defense, to say, whose arts will I support? I think it's absolutely vital. But is it always a competition? I don't know. I have to leave that for each person to make for themselves. You have to decide how you want to do that. And it's one of those things that if you can live without art, then you're not doing right. Art surrounds us all the time. You only have to look in the backgrounds here.
Yeah.
Look at the art that surrounds us. But that takes time, and it takes creativity, and it takes courage. And that's what I've tried to always be an example for, is be courageous in what you do. Pick up the sword and fight. Pick up the brush and paint. Take up the quill and scribe. Get the pots and pans out and get the good wood and cook. Do all the things that you are going to enjoy. And then when you get good at it, start teaching. If you're a good teacher, the laureate will come by itself. Maybe it will never come. That's something out of your control. But to be the good teacher, that's the most important element. So, all righty, questions, please. I'm tired talking now.
So I'm going to kind of roll back to the beginning of the interview. You talked about being out throughout your career in the SCA.
Yes.
How has that affected your path, and what kind of challenges has that given you?
I have to say, I have never run into discrimination in the SCA. I was a high school teacher for a few years until a student outed me and I was fired. So I've done it from the hard side of the world. I have marched in the streets. I have fought for that. I don't believe it has ever impacted my life in the SCA. And this, I think it also has to do with the people that I was lucky enough to meet early on were very, very welcoming. The first household that I joined was headed by two extremely religious people, extremely talented. This was Clan Thistlecairn. And they knew I was gay. They didn't care. They respected me. I never infringed on we never sat around having religious discussions, even though I was raised in a very religious household. I went to private school, in a women's religious school. I went to the College of Santa Fe, was the Christian Brothers. I've been involved in most of the Roman Catholic religion for all of my life. It's difficult. My mother is still with me. She has her beliefs. I respect her. She respects me mostly. She's worried she won't see me in heaven, but I think I've done what I was supposed to be doing. I have never been put down in the SCA. I have never been told nothing related to my private choices. And that's where I come from. What you do in the privacy of your pavilion is your own business. As long as it's two consenting adults. But I was one of the people at One Estrella that was on the hunt for a 15-year-old who was missing. The rumors were she was in someone's tent she shouldn't have been in. She was found in 15 minutes because that was wrong.
Right.
We see now that there's an office addressing some of these issues because it hasn't gotten better since I was in National Organization for Women, and I was on the lesbian task force. Of course, I would walk in my black suit. I never wore a tie. Well, I would wear it on special occasions for St. Patrick's Day and Easter and things because I had some great ties. But I never thought of myself as cross-dressing. I am who I am.
Right.
And I am Helen. And I am Pam. And that is just who I am. I have never had any problems in the kingdom of Atenveldt or any other kingdom I've been to. And I think that's one of the things that makes us very, very inclusive here in Atenveldt. I also have to say that I think I'm a tough lady because I used to do things like teachers cannot survive on a teacher's salary. So in the summer, I would bartend days in a biker bar. I was dealing with Hell's Angels and bikers and lots of tough guys, many of them veterans, who wouldn't put up with any shit, but they knew I wouldn't put up with it either.
Right.
And instead, I had the best day shifts that bar owner ever had. He said, "You can't leave. I got days paying for themselves now and making me money." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I have to go back to teaching now." So, it's hard for me. I have considered volunteering for the kingdom position for the non-discrimination issues that might exist.
Right.
I've been on enough sheriff's patrols to know that, yes, we have a lot of alcohol. I no longer make cordials that are sold. I only share them with people who bring me one of my empty bottles, and I will refer it because they're a dear friend. I know they're not abusing it. I know they're not sharing it with minors, etc.
Right.
But I don't think we can say that we have met all of the goals in that inclusivity. We have not. I think there are many areas of where the culture of that part of the world is not being respectful of people. And that's one of the things we're good at. We know how to play that game. We know how to do that theater. Now we have to get a step stronger and have the courage to say, we're not going to tolerate you within our organization to be disrespectful. That's as simple as it gets.
Yeah. Yeah. That really is a great way of just putting it very succinctly and simply. Yeah. Very cool. Were you in Ontario? We had a big movement for inspiration equality. As a fighter, did it ever affect you that you were not able to fight for your significant other or spouse?
The first time I addressed it was when I was competing for the baronial position of champion. I was the only one with foil. So I brought extra equipment with me and I fought anybody coming up. And I beat most of them. However, the Baron at the time, Jonathan White Wolf the Elder, didn't know what to do with me. Because not only did I fight, I cooked him a wonderful meal, multiple course meal. I brought examples of artwork. I did everything that was required to meet the requirements of baronial champion. He just couldn't do it. I think he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. And instead, he made me chatelaine. And I'm like, okay. I think he was taking of my advantage to be able to talk to anybody when I think I'm on stage. And I did feel, well, I made an effort. I made a showing. I did the best I could. I was the arts champion, but I wasn't the baronial champion. So I was very happy with that. And I was quite honored, really, that he thought I could take on the chatelaine's position and get started with that. Within a couple of months of that, like maybe a year, I was then the seneschal of the barony, because I would go deal with the city council, I would deal with the parks department, I would deal with almost anybody who if we wanted to keep in Canada, we had to do certain things. If we wanted to do that, it was whatever. And we turned fighter practice into what it turned into. We started our fighter practice with a potluck. Everybody get off work, have to have dinner before they can get into armor or get into start dancing or have music or anything. And we started putting up little pop-up pavilions went up and flags were flying. And it was only on a Wednesday night in the middle of the week at Encano Park. And it was effective. It was very effective. So there's still a lot of things that, do I wish that had happened? Well, deep down in a little part of my heart, yeah. Do I need that to happen now? No. I have met, and I didn't even know they were really goals for me until I started preparing for this interview going, I don't know, I've never answered some of these questions. So yeah, it was some of it difficult sometimes, yeah. But when you get Trelawn and Mark von Neumann and Duke Deaton, one of my biggest heroes, they're all my heroes. We were at Highlands and he came with a piper, a bagpiper played at Chucky Brown's wake. And Deaton sang and played, and it was, oh my God, you don't get that in everyday life. Not the strange one I've had. Well, you do sort of sometimes, but I got you crying.
Yeah, you did.
Did anybody ever get concerned about who was my partner? Well, you'd have to ask Duchess Katerina that question, because that was then. She's with someone else now. I'm with someone else now. And what we do is nobody's business. and that's why I've hesitated volunteering for the inclusion position, because it's like, I'm not going to understand all of the problems that I'm going to have to deal with, because I refuse to let them control my life. I've been out since I quit teaching. Then, can I go back to teaching now? I don't know. I don't think I can handle the kids anymore. But I always volunteer to help anybody who's got them. And, I can recommend books. I can do, you want to talk Shakespeare? I can make it make sense for you. I still like the element of teaching in a lot of ways, and the SCA has given me the opportunity to do that.
Someone is asking, what made you want to take on a page?
Well, one of my first pages was my fencing coach's son, and she gave him to me because she said, I'm going to kill him. He was 11. He was 11, and an extremely bright young man, very, very bright, too bright sometimes, to the point where he did remind me, I think he may have been the pattern for Sheldon myself. But the disadvantage was that he did not know how to talk to other than a very small circle of people. And it was starting to affect his ability to advance in his education, is that he couldn't bring himself to ask the questions because he was embarrassed to be not knowledgeable enough to answer them. And that's one of the problems with gifted children,
right?
Is that they want to be all knowing. They don't understand that you will never be all knowing. There is too much to know. You have to be willing to ask those questions, and you have to ask them in the right way.
Yeah, and they don't like to not be good at something immediately.
Oh, exactly, yeah. Exactly. So taking on a page for me was, not only was I responsible for a young boy, which I don't have any children by my body. I borrowed a lot of them. I put them back when I was done. Hopefully I brought them back relatively clean, well-fed, and probably not had enough sleep. But my very first page was Rowan, and he was a challenge. At the time, my consort, who was a lovely man, his wife did not play, so he was willing to be my consort. And he fought for me in all the baronial championships and crown tournament and lots of places. And his wife didn't care. She was like, fine, honey, go have a good time. You know, he was perfectly safe with me. Nothing's going to happen. And he was also one of my favorite guys. He was a big guy. I'm kind of a sucker for the big guys. So Jonathan, one of them, Duke Deaton, Dennis, yeah, Egan was one of those as well. Taking on a page is, or a handmaiden, or any of those in that age group is really a challenge, because they forget to do some things that they should do. And you have to really know how to listen to them. And I hope I've always done that with mine, that I would listen, I would ask what they wanted to do, I would do whatever encouragement, or get them the tools, or get them the, whatever would help them succeed for their projects, in their education, in their reading, and let them know that they've got somebody on their side who's not a parent, but who respects them as a person. And it's tough. Taking on a page, or even taking on an apprentice or a protege, it's a delicate situation. It's a full-time relationship in some cases that does require commitment. I haven't been always good at it. I tried to be. I very, very hard tried to be. And that's why I still consider myself a supporter of Lady Kalar, Lady, I'm just going to say Shannon, because I can't remember all my names. And I was thrilled when Morgaine, who I've known for the same 30 years, was offered her pelican. It had been a very hard decision, because she had told me early on she did not want to be recognized with a peerage, but she has done the work of 2 peerages, mine and hers. She was someone who was always at my back. And the pages, the kids, the handmaidens were always willing to do things they'd never done before. And I had to be careful that I didn't ask them to do too much. And then I would forget to check things like, have you eaten? Have you gone to the bathroom? Have you that's that mom stuff. It's that mom stuff that I'm not good at.
Yeah.
And it was always an honor to have those children trust me and believe in me enough to say, I want to work with you. And that is like a huge compliment, but oh my God, a huge responsibility too. So I hope I did well.
And I know that I'm going to get teary again. I'm sorry. I know that having an adult as a child, having an adult that cares about you appropriately,
yes,
and fosters you and treats you like you're important and matter, can make or break a human being. Mm-hmm. It's a really, those kind of aunties and uncles are a hugely important role to play in a child's life.
Yeah. Well, and in some of them, I was other mother. Yeah.
It's pretty wonderful. It's a beautiful gift. Sorry.
That's why you cry.
I warned you, I'm mushy. Well, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered tonight?
Well, I'm thinking back that one of the stories that I didn't tell related to the historical encampment, the Enchanted Ground, was that after I received, the night before, I did not sleep. The night of my vigil, I did not sleep. Finally, everybody wandered away, and the fires were allowed to go down, and everybody just kind of, and I could not sleep. So I said, well, what am I going to do? Now, I had been involved in some element of the Australia War for, I want to say 95, 80, I want to say almost 10 years, as a merchant's autocrat, as a herald for royalty, as the dirt auctioneer, working security, working, wherever I could. But when it was my turn, I went walking out of my pavilion after everybody was gone, and we, everything was tidied up and put away, and everything was ready for the next day. And it was pretty much, I think it was a very moonless night that particular night. The moon wasn't coming up until very, very almost closer to dawn. And I said, well, I'm just going to have to walk. So I walked the entire site of Australia War, and I went through all of Merchants Row, because that had been one of my major goals, was to improve Merchants Row and get people to come out. Now, one of the reasons that I have the picture of the Baroness there is that she was my hook for Merchants Row. When I first arrived, I had come from the arts community in hosting craft fairs, hosting art exhibits, openings, supporting different galleries. Literally, there's a gallery in Santa Fe that started, and I gave it not only, I wrote ads for them, I wrote things. I found one of the potters' kiln blew up. It's like, I'll find you a kiln. I got them one from Albuquerque. I took the truck down, drove it back up. Here's your kiln. Go back to work. And they were like, I'm like, I said, I want a set of dishes out of this. And they gave me a set of dishes about 2 years later and said, I can't believe you did that. It's like, yeah. And they became very, very well known in Santa Fe. So I had come from supporting an arts organizations, as well as the women's art fairs, and we had done a lot of women's concerts. I was either producer or stage manager or whatever for people like Holly Near, Chris Williamson, Judy. a lot of them would be in Redwood Records and other, it was the early feminist music thing. And supporting those people by getting the money backing to get the sites so that they could pull that. Or in some cases, it's like, okay, what have I got this week? What can we afford this, So when I finally got through, I got my Pelican too early, so I earned it again. I hosted over 60 events, but I couldn't have done it with all of the people that surrounded me then. And that includes Morgane and Dawn and Shannon and her mom and all of Clan Thistlecaren in many cases would jump in and help. And there were so many people who will just quietly volunteer that you have to remember to try and thank them. And that's one of the things I'm the worst at. I always forget to thank them because, it's like, well, we just pulled a rabbit out of our hat. Y'all did great. Bye. You go on to the next challenge. But I could not have done it without those people. And I wandered through all of Estrella War that night. And it started to get very humid, and it started to get very cool, and it started to get foggy, which is very unusual in the desert. When you get a fog like that in the Estrella Park, which is at the foot of the Estrella Mountains, and there's no source of water, it just comes out of the plants. It's like this is magic. And I wandered back towards the historical encampment, which is where my vigil was held. And the fog has settled in to where all the trees are floating in that fog. There's only a few candles still burning. It was just like the most magical moment you can imagine. I felt so small, but so filled that I can't describe it any other way. And then you know what happens next? Up comes the moon. The goddess symbol of the world comes up and lights it all magically. And it was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. I still have the image in my head. Wow. I still remember what the fog felt coming up under my skirts. And the lights, just an amazing event. So my Laurel and my Pelican are so special to me.
That sounds like such a magical moment. So wonderful.
Was.
Yeah, that's great. You are just a force of nature, and it has been such an honor to be able to interview you. Thank you so much.
Well, who else is here with us? Have they got any questions?
Well,
I know Kaylar's there, and I know Shannon's there.
They're just singing your praises left and right.
Yeah, that's because those were my handmaidens and pages.
Yeah,
they are the best. So
they did ask the page question, and they asked. They say they love you.
Love them too.
Adeline says hi. Una is watching too.
Lovely. So, how wonderful.
Do you have any questions, our lovely audience, before we go? They miss you. They love you. You're gonna have to read the comments because it's just a huge love fest.
I will do that. I will do that. I'll have to go back and put those. Thank you all very much for being here.
So I do have a couple more questions.
Sure.
I can pull some questions out. I can stop.
I'm gonna do this here. I'm gonna take off my Court Barony. That thing is just starting to hurt my head. Okay.
So what has inspired you to keep going in the SCA?
One of them is that the acceptance I have always found and the closeness. I have buried too many friends already in the SCA, and it makes it very hard to continue and move forward. Also admitting that I am not 30 or 40 or 50 anymore. I cannot do some of this stuff that I want to. So I took the class that was held on Sunday from the Mid-Realm on luxury ladies travel wagons.
Ooh.
So when I win the lottery, I'm going to get a travel wagon so that I can make it much easier to get to an event, not having to put up a tent, because I've owned almost every style of tent they're made. The only one I haven't done is a Viking, and I think I'm going to do that one now, simply because then we can open it up and have a shade. And at Estrella, believe me, in November, it's going to be warm. We are used to a cold, wet, windy, stormy, crazy war. Last year, I had a tent up. Luckily, I did not stay, because when I came back, there was somebody had warned me to buy my knee boots, get my Wellingtons out, because we had 6 to 8 inches of water in my camp. But the door of my tent held, and I had a dry space that I could offer to a merchant and her son. Their entire pavilion was soaked. Everything they brought to sell was soaked. They were just happy to have someplace dry to sleep. And I said, "You sure you don't want to come home with me? You could take a hot shower." And they're like, "No, we can't leave the pavilion. We're going to trade off and take shifts. Someone will stay at the merchant's row and someone will be in your tent sleeping." So that's part of what keeps me going, is being able to step in, help, and improvise something immediately that will help make somebody else's enjoyment, even in 8 inches of water, better. I am still learning things. I was thrilled to be able to send some pictures of wagons from the 14th century, which is my main focus. Usually I am dressed in the garb of a pilgrim, because at one point, when I finally stopped admitting that I could do all the things, let me rephrase that. When I finally realized that I had to admit that I couldn't do some of the things that I wanted, I had to go on a quest to find a pilgrimage that would take me forward. And I have not been able to participate as much as I would like, but I've gotten to what I can get to now. If I can get travel and still be able to get to some events, I will do that. However, given our recent circumstances with the pandemic, with the shutdown, I have been on, I think I'm in about 20 groups. There are about 10 of them that I comment on regularly. SCA garb, the SCA camping, better SCA camping, enchanted ground. There's a bunch of them that I do put in my 2 cents worth and try to encourage people to, spend your money wisely and keep asking questions. What I'm concerned about is that whether I'm being too pontifical, being the Pope that I used to be, and not really listening well enough, because the language spoken in the present generation is a little bit different from the language that I had in mind. And there's nothing worse than having a pontifical old lady telling you how to do something. It's just not good. So,
unless you're really hungry for that knowledge, I think one of the beautiful things about this pandemic has been getting people talking and sharing so much more information electronically. And I hope that continues, because I think that that is actually making the SCA much more inclusive.
Yes, I hope so. Which is also one of my reasons for wanting to come on and be very clear. Yes, I am a lesbian. Yes, I am out. Yes, I dress like a woman sometimes, but sometimes I don't. And luckily, this lovely piece of garb, which is part of an entire outfit that was gifted to me.
That's beautiful.
Just, oh my gosh. There's not, we'll just, give me a second here. Let me grab it.
I'm tempted to start humming the Jeopardy theme song or something. She is coming back, I hope. Well, while she's doing her thing, I am going to talk about some of the upcoming interviews. Tomorrow we have Sir Antonio from Ontier, who is kind of expert on the history of Ontier. And then on Sunday, I have an interview with two cooking Laurels from Drachenwald at 11 Pacific time on Sunday. So Helen, what are you showing us?
I am showing you a piece of embroidery by a lovely lady known as Lady Hawk. Wow. Michelle Loomis is a wonderful, talented member of the Girls in the Band, which is a sewing group here in Atenveldt that makes the most amazing embroidery and band. But what she did for this one is, you see the trim here? She learned how to card weave just for this outfit. Wow. This is all of her hand embroidery. This is the work of many other members of the ladies of the band, Lady Aurora, band saying whatever Sherry's name is. Now, Lisbetta, I remembered it. See, sooner or later I get it. And it was gifted to me just, talk about making me cry. Oh my God. I asked their help because I can no longer do the hand sewing I did. And it's so frustrating for me. But then I have been a hard riding, hard shooting, fencing, fishing. I still want to go kayaking. I still have my boat ready to go. I just have to have the courage to get out there and do it and hurt myself and not worry about it. And to admit that I can't do those things is very hard. That's, but I'm not going to let. This was the most amazing gift. The trim, all hand done. The stitching, all hand done. The garb, all hand done. And it was for the investiture of Morgaine ap Rhys Griffith, my longest running apprentice protege of ever. So when she got her pelican, she asked that we be in Norse, and I went, okay, I can do Norse. Ordinarily, I am in my pilgrim's garb, and that pilgrim's garb has part of the role of a pilgrimage, because I have done a single pilgrimage to the tomb of Saint Martin in Tours. I've been there. I went there for my best friend in high school's brother, who was profoundly deaf. We were on pilgrimage. We went from Rome. We went to Paris. We went to Tours. We stayed in the convent on the property where his tomb is located. We went to Mass with the nuns, and we crawled on our knees up the stairs to get into St. Martin's tomb. And I took some dirt with me. It could have been a symbol, okay? But we were instructed to bring back what we could of the dirt because, according to tradition, St. Martin's the patron saint of the deaf. So literally, when we got back, Martin's mother, he was named Martin on purpose. Martin's mother took some of the dirt and put it in his ears.
Oh, wow.
Many ear doctors would say, don't do that. But Martin had been sent to a school this is my high school best friend, her younger brother, had been sent to a school in St. Louis where he learned to speak. And he had, he wore hearing aids, but he had so little hearing it really didn't do anything. So he spoke from rote, but they did not want him to use sign. At the time, sign was not considered the best way to go if you wanted to be extremely successful. Well, Martin was also very gifted. I don't know what the dirt did it. or mom's pressure or whatever, but Martin went to MIT on a full scholastic scholarship.
Wow.
To be a scientist and be profoundly deaf is not easy. But according to my understanding now, he has been extremely successful.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So for some reason, there's, you know, the things with the dirt and it, you know, it's all a connection. It's all connected. It's all connected. So when you're on the pilgrimage, and I do wear my pilgrimage, but I never get further than Tours. I recreate the year 1395, just after the Battle of Crécy, just before the Renaissance begins to bloom. And 2 generations after the decimation of the population of Europe from the Black Plague. It was a huge time of women becoming stronger, more women merchants, more women artists, more women heading businesses, all of those things that are real similar to what we're doing now. And that pilgrimage is what keeps me going.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you again for tonight.
You're most welcome.
Yeah. I already talked about the upcoming interviews while you were getting your apron, your beautiful apron. So thank you again. And if you send me that cordial recipe, I will post it up on the page for people to check out.
I did send it to you this afternoon, but if you want to retype it, it's not very readable. And if you want, and then just check with me if there's any questions.
Okay, I will do that.
All right.
It's been
well, thank you everybody for joining me.
It's been wonderful to get to know you.
Well, Dawn, if I can help you in any way, you have but to ask.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow with my sister. Good night.
Travel safe.